Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs, and welcome to another fantastic panel here at the Baltimore Comic Con. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm very excited to do this. Well, it's Spies Like Comics. I didn't know James Bond was a comic reader. I didn't know Ethan Hunt had an entire bagged and boarded collection of X-Men. Who knew? Well, you're going to find out on this panel, and I have a great bunch of people here. First, I'm going to bring them on one by one, talk a little bit about them. Stephanie Phillips is here. Now, Stephanie Phillips, not only has she worked on Harley Quinn, Superman, Crimes of Passion, she's working on the new heavy metal Tarna comic, if you are a fan of the heavy metal animated film from 1981. Her own work, Butcher of Paris, A Man Among Ye, Artemis the Assassin, and something I particularly like, Red Atlantis. So welcome her to this panel. I mean, come on. What kind of work is this? It's amazing. I can't believe I'm going to talk to her about spy comics. Who doesn't like that? Also, we have Doug Wagner joining us. My God, Doug Wagner has worked, of course, on everything from Witchblade to Red Sonja. I'm looking at his list of comics, his 12-gauge titles, Ride, Plastic he's known for, The Hard Place, Loose Ends. I can't believe it. It's amazing. And then we've got Brian Stelfreeze, who has worked with another member of our panel. I got to know his work on the covers of Shadow of the Bat. And as a matter of fact, I've been digging through my long boxes, and I was just going through my Shadow of the Bat collection, and there's a lot there to love. And then, of course, there is Jeff Parker, our final member of the panel.
Hey guys.
Uh-oh. Well, hello. Hello, now I have all of you. Oh, is Stephanie not here?
No,
Steph will not be joining us today.
Well, Stephanie won't be doing. Well, that's too bad. I'm glad to have all of you gents. And I want to jump right into it about spy comics. I mean, that's what we're here to talk about. Now, here's the thing that I was just looking. I really have been digging through my long boxes, and I came across Mike Grell's John Sable freelance comics from the early 80s. And that dealt with kind of espionage and things like that. But in our new world of the internet and hacking, is spycraft in comics? How do you make it interesting? How do you draw that? And are spies, I mean, do you have to make it a period piece? Do you have to do, how do you make spy comics relevant today?
Oh, I think I'll jump on this first, and I think Jeff's going to have a lot to say about this. But like, anytime there's sort of political unrest, particularly between countries, that's like fertile ground for spies. And right now, with all the talk of like, Russia was everything as far as spies are concerned.
Right.
But then Russia disappeared, and it sort of killed spies. But now Russia's back, baby. so like Russia and China and all the political unrest that's going on right now, there's a lot of really cool things we can do with spies.
Well, do you think, I mean, as writers and artists, how do you, like, I keep thinking back when I was growing up, like I loved Nick Fury and SHIELD because it was a spy organization in the Marvel universe, you know, and when and I loved Bond films growing up, and I watched Man from U.N.C.L.E. as a kid, and now you ask people who Napoleon Solo and Ilya Kuryakin, who they are, and people don't really know. Now we've got Ethan Hunt. How do you translate the excitement and the action of spycraft onto the comic book page? How does one write that?
I feel like first stay away from what most of modern spycraft is, which is people fishing for passwords.
Right.
It's not super visually interesting in a comic book. So
Right.
I try to get past that, you know, have someone already off panel got it, and move on. I mean, but the still the classic spy thing is like Brian was talking about the Russians, like I'm forgetting her name, Maria Butinova, the one who,
who with the NRA.
Who did the NRA?
The cartoon Russian spy.
Exactly. She's like Moose and Squirrel, and she's like she did all the classic spies honey trap type stuff. I mean, that's all still working fine, as the movie Borat now on Amazon Prime will show us. It's like,
Right.
look, they'll just walk right up, blink at an old guy and with a pretty girl, and bam, you've got a lot of access and information and things to do. And of course, then guns and shooting and things. That's Doug's department. I'll just
What I think's interesting about it all is what, going back to what Brian was saying too, like, we used to have one enemy, and now we don't know who our real enemies are. And I think the spy game has changed there to where, like, man, do we really know who's on our side and who's not on our side? And what
Right.
Brian was saying with the current political situation, like, I mean, now our allies switch depending on the president.
Yeah.
And so who do we spy on? Everybody? Like, I mean,
Right.
so I think, go ahead.
Yeah.
no, I
Yeah.
think for us. I mean, obviously we spy on us now.
Oh, yeah.
That was something that wasn't. It's funny when you Robert, you brought up Man from U.N.C.L.E. I hope everybody saw that movie from a couple of years ago.
It was good, wasn't it?
It was
I loved
really
it.
good, and it was such a weird thing to me because as such a huge Bond nerd, I couldn't stand Spectre, and then found the Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie was like 100 times better. I was like, what the hell world have I walked into here?
I couldn't agree more. I mean,
But Guy
Army-
Ritchie really got behind it. It was a lot of fun, and I like stuff like that. I mean, it's fantastical,
Yeah.
but it's also, I like that they made it a period piece. They really got a lot of mileage out of that.
No, and the
yeah.
film was beautifully designed, and I think one of the elements I think of the spy genre is the whole milieu. I always see spies as when they're going out at night, they wear tailored suits. They're wearing Tom Ford or something, and so I don't know why, but I think of like Howard Chaykin's American Flag, which it wasn't necessarily a spy comic. I mean, it was about law enforcement, but I always thought that Howard Chaykin, the world he drew, the art, the panel design, the way that Ken Brusenak's sound. I mean, you could hear a Howard Chaykin comic because of the way that they use letters and text and sound and all that. Is that a part of it too? I mean, the design, whether it's gadgets or guns or the women, is that as much a part of, like, when you guys are conceiving these comics?
I think it's a huge part of it. In fact, I think when we really get down to the DNA of it, James Bond, for one, I think that represents, when you do a spy comic represents the unknown enemy. Superhero comics represent the obvious enemy. There's the bad guy. Let's go kick his butt. But the spy comic, you have no idea who the enemy is, but hell, you're a man. You need to do something about it. So what's really cool with the James Bond movies and the James Bond novels, you have to remember the James Bond stories started in male chauvinist magazine, Playboy. So it represented everything that the American man of the time wanted to be. He wanted to sleep with women. He wanted to defeat the unknown enemy. And quite frankly, most American men wanted to be as cool as English guys. So it was just fantasy. And I think it's fantasy fulfillment, just like superhero comics. I mean, with Batman represents an injustice that's been done to us that we'd like to fix. Superman represents the outsider that wants to be the best insider. And Spy Comics represents the man who wants to defeat the unknown enemy.
Right. Well, it's interesting that there's been a lot of talk about how Lashana Lynch is playing, I think, a 00 agent in the new Bond film. And I think she looks incredible in her tactical outfit with her big gun. She looks amazing, and she can be a 00 as far as I'm concerned. And then we had like J.J. Abrams' series Alias. I thought, at least for the first season.
I love that.
I mean, it was great to see. And then we had things like La Femme Nikita, Luc Besson's La Femme Nikita, and we've seen a lot of great kick-ass female spy. Well, women that are familiar with spycraft. So
Yeah.
is it just as important now in you've got a equal opportunity kick-ass
I think as long as they're
spies?
not James Bond, it's like if you create something from the ground up to be that, awesome, but
Right.
don't just make a female James Bond.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't have a problem with. We've seen other 00 agents in the film franchise, obviously. So it never really bothered me that we had Anya Amasova, Triple X, in Spy Who Loved Me,
Yeah.
played by Barbara Bach, who was amazing, and she was basically Bond's equal until they, they put Bond in a above her, so to speak. But there is a great scene. There's a great scene in that film where you've got General Gogol and Anya and Triple X, and then Bond and M, and they're kind of going back and forth, seeing which spy knows more things. And
Yeah.
I always liked that scene. That was the first Bond film I ever saw in the theater, and I loved it. But I think that one of the things about spy stories is you got to have a good villain. And I think one of the problems with the last Bond film, Spectre, was that Blofeld didn't really do anything. He had this base in the desert, and they were just data mining.
It was a real good buildup to a disappointment.
Yeah. I mean, what happened to like stealing 2 nuclear bombs? Like in Thunderball, they land a plane at sea. They've got a runway that lights up under the ocean, and the plane, they infiltrate the RAF, and people have eyeballs that have been treated so they can get past security. What about the development of villains? Like, what makes a great villain in a spy story?
It's tough. The Bond movies often fall into how can we maim somebody? And it's like, all right, I don't know that I need a scar on everybody or anything. You can get away from that, but it's tough to distinguish the villain. It's the Batman scenario there. I don't know. Again, back to, if they've got a big beard and don't use articles when they talk, I'm fine. I love Cold War villains.
And I also think that that the villains, if they're done right, they have to be just as cool as Bond.
Right.
Right.
And it's that thing where Bond's cool has to defeat this villain's cool.
Yeah.
No, right. I like that.
And that's really tough to pull off. If you have a bad guy that's just, like Jeff said, one of these guys that just laughs at his hands, that's not enough. You've got to have a bad guy that's competent enough to pull off this awesome thing, and only James Bond's supreme power of coolness can take him down.
Well, it's often their number 2 henchmen who turn out to be the more interesting ones. You get Oddjob, who's one of my all-time favorite characters, because he doesn't act evil. In fact, he's always laughing at James Bond all through the movie. Like in that one where they're driving through the warehouse and Bond thinks a car is coming at him, pulls over and crashes into a bunch of boxes. And then Oddjob walks around the corner and sees there's a mirror there, and he just smiles. Like everything works out for him, and I love that. You've got to have like a big robot hand or some jaws or something. Like they can really go to town. Baron Samedi. I mean, that's where all the really good villains. They weren't the main villains, but they were the ones who were over the top and the ones you want to draw. And
Xenia Onatopp.
Yeah.
I mean, she was crazy and she could drive a car. What a great hench person. I think in like the comics realm, I remember reading the New Teen Titans, and they kind of introduced Slade Wilson, the Terminator, and he was to me a great spy-like villain because he was an assassin and he wasn't really super powered. I mean, he kind of was, but he was just as much an equal, and he was into subterfuge. He had a henchwoman infiltrate the Titans, and I always thought that Slade Wilson would have made a great Bond villain. That's why I like GoldenEye. You had 006, Sean Bean's character. Alex Trevelyan was a former 006 turned villain and was like Bond's equal. It's not like Michael Lonsdale is Hugo Drax, who just stands around and says, see that some harm comes to him, Mr.
Looking like Nixon. That was just his thing.
Right. Yeah. Or I mean, you look at like in Spy Who Loved Me, it's Carl Stromberg. He's just like an old British industrialist or something. And yeah, he might have built an underwater city, but what's he going to do to you? Unless he has and I've always liked, you go back and you look at the John le Carré, like I recently watched not the Gary Oldman version, but the Alec Guinness, the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and the Smiley's People, and those sort of Byzantine plots, which are kind of hard to do in a comic book because you have to have action. Don't you?
Not John le Carré. I wonder if I can do this with just people sitting in hotel rooms talking.
Right. I mean, how do you? Is it difficult to approach those kinds of stories because you have to? Do you design a comic spy story or like a movie around the action set pieces, or is plotting king? How do you come to create a spy story in comic form? What is the secret origin of a great spy comic?
Doug?
I mean, for me, and I say this all the time, I'm going to start with character first. If I can get the reader to become invested in the lead character and maybe even a cool henchman, I think everything else there will help write itself. I always think that people go see James Bond because they love James Bond. It's not because we know what the plot's going to be before we even walk into the door.
Right.
But if you love James Bond and you love the characters that are in it, you're still going to go watch it and enjoy it. And that's kind of how I approach when I start out, how can I get people to like this character? That's the first thing I think of.
Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of domino sort of building to it. Like if you set up the right pieces with a spy story, after a while, the action kind of flows from that. The action just kind of naturally just kind of falls into to fill the gap. And I find that with a story that Doug and I are writing right now, we have to make ourselves stop thinking about action sequences. It's so easy to kind of go, and wouldn't it be cool if so it's just like the action part of it is actually easy. It's the making the espionage worth it, because I think the thing that separates spy stories from other stories is, I think with a lot of other stories, particularly superhero stories, you get the politician pass where people just kind of go, well, I know you're lying to me. I'm just wondering how entertaining the lie is going to be.
I love that, the politician pass.
Yeah, but with a spy story, people kind of go, well, I know you're lying to me, but it better sound truthful. And you're basically hiding the lie within the lie. And the first lie has to be believable so that the second lie, which is incredible, actually works. If the first lie, if James Bond does something like he just starts flying, people automatically go, oh, I'm out. Or if he has super strength, it's like, no. And I think even with the Pierce Brosnan stories, that's the line that they crossed. They turned Bond into a superhero who could do magical things and had an invisible car. And once that happens, it's just like, this is crap. But all the other, the best Bond movies push it right to the edge where you go, oh yeah, that technology might exist.
Right. I mean, they did a good job pulling back on that when they introduced Daniel Craig in Casino Royale. I thought Casino Royale, such a great film, because ultimately, I mean, you have a half an hour sequence of they're playing Texas Hold'em. And Le Chiffre was Mads Mikkelsen was so great as Le Chiffre.
And of course, like Jeff said, you have to have an injury and crying blood.
Cheers. And then I like Jeffrey Wright having to come in and being the American, like, all right, we'll give you money. You know, like, that to me is where they get the most honest dynamic of the whole thing. Like, we can't do it, but we've got a lot of money. I'll front game.
It's like, I'm not the cool guy, but I will back the cool guy.
Right.
See,
He was,
Right.
I'm glad they've brought him back in No Time to Die, because I loved him as Felix Leiter. I thought he was
he's great.
He's a great addition to, and they keep, when he was paired up, I think in Quantum of Solace, when he's paired up with the white dude, the taller white guy, and they have that kind of banter about what they're gonna do, and how they're gonna deal with this. And I guess we're staking Bond again, and I love that. And I think that another thing that I think has appeal. I remember reading once about the Bond franchise starting on film in the early 60s when Dr. No came out in 62. You basically had an American population. The middle class had been created by everybody coming back from World War II, and you had things like the GI Bill and the sort of the Leave It to Beaver 50s. And everybody had sort of settled down, and the Bond franchise, at least on film, obviously the books were popular, but suddenly you actually were seeing images of Bond on planes, flying to these exotic locations. Most Americans didn't even have passports. And it was sort of, like you had said earlier, wish fulfillment for men. Everybody wanted to be Bond, but also sort of the exotic nature of the whole world. It wasn't just the women and the cars, but it was also the locations and the glamour. I mean, it's funny, the Bond franchise kind of, they in Where World Is Not Enough, they go to an oil field in Kazakhstan or something, and it's like, who wants to go there? And I'd rather go to an ice palace and die another day. But
No, they go to Jamaica, and it's just because Ian Fleming lived in Jamaica. I mean, it's not like he's like, oh, I can write this. It's like this is it wasn't exactly a hot spot of where the Cold War was converging.
No,
they made it there. I love. Yeah, and you get cool characters like Bond's supporting team, like Quarrel,
right?
Yeah, or whatever. When she comes up and cuts him in the face with a broken bottle, and he laughs at her, like, oh, yeah, that's a great fit. And you made me think. Brian was talking about something that made me think of one of my all-time favorite Bond fights is in From Russia with Love.
Oh yeah,
it's just him and Robert Shaw duking it out on that train. Yeah, and it looks like a real fight. And from a book I read, like Shaw got in some real hits on Sean Connery, and Connery was mad about it. And I don't blame Sean. Robert Shaw looks like he could probably knock you out.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I mean, Red Grant's great.
I mean, they're just slamming around in there. They have there's no choreography. They're just beating the crap out of each other. And I'm like, wow. Yeah, I still don't see fights in movies that are that convincing.
No.
And something interesting that you said is that right after World War II and the GI Bill and everything, if you think about it, that's when the enemy went underground. That's when we didn't have, and I venture to say, not since World War II have we had a giant, obvious enemy. But at the same time, a lot of these military guys were coming home, and they had seen the world, and they were stepping up into, because a lot of them were country boys,
right,
that now had a little bit of money. So there was this attraction to class, and Bond was just the master of it. And I think that whole thing of being able to walk into a casino in Monte Carlo and be able to sit down and order the right drink and all this stuff. It's like that was the fantasy that all these hicks coming back from war had. And I think that fantasy persists because there's really no difference between James Bond and Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
They're just guys with class, and I think
who both kill.
Oh yeah, and I think very few people were cheering for Jodie Foster. So in that movie, and everyone was just like, "Whoa, the dude with class! Yeah, let's go with him."
Well, it's interesting. He would say like he would eat the rude. Like he got rid of people that needed to be gotten rid of, at least in his mind. If someone can't play the right violin in this local symphony, it's like, oh, that guy's got to go. But what was great is that Hannibal Lecter, like Bond, he doesn't just know what drink to order; he knows what temperature the champagne has to be served at.
Yeah.
And then he knows everything about everything. There's another great moment in Spy Who Loved Me where he's meeting Carl Stromberg for the first time, and he's undercover as an ichthyologist, and Stromberg is like, "Do you know this fish?" And of course Bond does. He's done his homework. Like, and you're like, I didn't know James Bond knew so much about tropical fish, but apparently he does. And that was always something I think that as a kid when I was watching Bond, I was like, I hope I can grow up and know stuff like he does. Like about everything, and then as I got older, I realized I don't care what fish. I don't want to learn about fish other than the ones I want to eat. I don't want to be able to identify what spiny, tropical, pretty fish that is. I don't care unless it tastes good.
To never be called out. To always just
and well, how do you? I mean, again, bringing it back to the comics medium. I mean, obviously, it seems like all of us have been influenced by Bond films, and I really love what they are doing with the Mission Impossible franchise. I thought both Rogue Nation and Fallout, the last two, have been quite good. I think they've outdone the Bond franchise, both in terms of action and just in terms of how much fun those movies are to watch. Not just Tom Cruise doing the stunts, but all of the supporting characters and how they all interact with one another. It's great when there's a team of people that work like clockwork together to achieve a goal. But how do you recreate that I mean, Doug, you were talking about character. You start with character, and I believe that. I've always said that you have to start with your character and then your story, and then your shared universe and things like that come later. But you have to have characters first. But how do you build a good spy story after you've got the character? Is it all about the plot? Do you come up with the villain first? Do you have set pieces, or do you come up with a climax that you want to see? And since you can't have a soundtrack or you can't have real explosions, how do you bring that same excitement to the page?
I think for me, it was lucky because I'm co-writing with Brian. So we would sit in the darks of our offices and just spit out the worst ideas you could possibly come up with and see what would stick to the wall. And basically, it comes down to like Brian and I started going, "Hey, let's write the spy comic we want to read." And I think that's where the key comes in. Is like make sure we're writing a comic that we think we would enjoy reading, and hope that it builds from there, and maybe somebody else likes it. I know Jeff, maybe you can speak more to that because I know you're working a little bit alone on this one.
But you guys somehow are able to make a car chase work in a comic, which I always advise people to stay away from. But you've done it repeatedly, and I'm like, geez, they made an exciting car chase. How did they do that? And
how did you do that? Like, how did you do that?
Well, I think there's a big secret with comics, and I realized it early on, which is when the action starts, the plot ends. There's usually not a plot that continues, and even the writers would write like, plot, stop, and then they fight. At the end of the fight, Joker's victorious, and plot. So you'd have like maybe 3 or 4 pages of a fight, but I think what that does is that encourages the artists to do pictures of people fighting, and not a fight, not a fight with a plot. And one of the things that I think Doug really picked up on even back in the Gun Candy days is for us to kind of go, okay, we have a fight here. How can we reveal something about the character or reveal something about the plot in the fight? So in the fight, it's going to be like, okay, they're fighting, but we need to get across that this person is just defensive. They're just defending themselves. They're not actually attacking. Or this person is dirty, and they're gonna scheme. They're gonna try to do something underhanded. They're gonna throw sand in your face. so that even when they're fighting, rather than it being cool pictures of people throwing an awesome kick or an awesome punch, which I think comics, and I'm going to say the word, descend into that with
Right.
action sequences. What ends up happening is people kind of go, oh, wow, this isn't just pictures. This is actually plot that's happening.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to refer to it. Your character has to be revealed in the way even you fight. Otherwise, you plug any character into that fight, and you don't want that. Like when Daniel Craig is chasing that guy through the construction site.
Oh, so good.
Remember, like he's parkouring all over the wall, and Craig smashes through the drywall.
Yeah.
Like
Sebastian Foucault, the
character as they're doing their chase, and it's like that's brilliant storytelling.
What's
going on?
And I tell you, the opposite of that is I was watching the Tim Burton Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and suddenly like the headless horseman like goes into this wushu double sword. I was just like, wait a minute. I didn't know the headless horseman was Asian.
How did he train for that exactly? And did he lose his head before he learned how to use it?
Yeah, it was like total like Ying Wu Pin, sort of stunt fighting. And it's just like, okay, that's cool in the Matrix. But in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, this is actually just action for the sake of action.
Well, you guys remind me of this is sort of a different thing, but when Paul Verhoeven was making Basic Instinct, there were sex scenes in there, and he had said that he storyboarded all of his sex scenes because it was not just about the sex, it was about the suspense. And was Catherine Trammell going to kill Nick Curran, Michael Douglas's character? And he needed to build that suspense up because normally, like you said, in a movie like Basic Instinct, they would have when somebody's having a little sexy time, the plot would stop, and he didn't want that to happen. And it was really interesting to hear you say the same thing about, I think that action, if you can keep the plot going and do something that is intellectually engaging rather than just having a fight scene. And I think the best fight scenes are intellectually engaging, but then you also have the added difficulty of having static pages. And I'm curious, as Jeff was saying for you, Doug and Brian, how do you plan a car chase that works on the page? How do you do that? Like, do you storyboard that out first? Do you talk about the beats, the story beats?
One of the things that I think is important, and I will double down on what we were talking about, even for dialogue scenes, even when you have two characters talking, I can really increase my page rate by just doing pages of people with their mouths open, and just the dialogue kind of telling the story. But what I try to do is I try to go, okay, let me make something happen. Let me walk the scene. Let me have the characters doing stuff while they're talking to each other. And that'll reveal something about character or something about plot. One of the important things that I try to do in every page is try to go, what's the story of this page? What happens on this page? And there's got to be a little tiny beginning, middle, and end. So when you look at that page without reading any of the dialogue, something happened. Yeah. And then on the next page, something else has got to happen, and something else has got to happen. And if you were to just go through the entire book without ever reading it and just describe what happened on every page, technically that's the plot of the story. So even in a car chase, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to think, okay, this car's got an advantage, this car's catching up, this car's passed. So there's a little story that happened on that page.
So when you and Doug are collaborating as writers, are you also doing that? Do you go back and forth? Do you send visual ideas to Doug, or does Doug come up with a scenario that you then can pencil or do some kind of like story? I keep going back to the movies, but storyboarding.
Doug and I we're the worst example. What we have a bad habit of doing is the plot gets figured out, and then Doug writes the script as a screw you, deal with that. And then I jump in and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Screw you, deal with that.
Well, that sounds like a great way to collaborate. I love it.
Oh yeah. It's taking like I know the story. So when I get the script from Doug, it's the story, but he wants to get me excited by taking it up a notch. And then I know he knows what he wrote, but it's just like now my job is, well, when this goes back to Doug, he's going to be shocked because I've taken things up just a little bit more. So it's just a fun collab, and the fact that we've been buddies for like 100 years, I think helps out.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Doug, I don't know. Doug always throws something different than what I expect to me.
Well, I think that's like, well, Jeff, for you, I mean, you worked a lot in the Marvel universe and did like Agents of Atlas, and you worked on stuff like X-Men First Class. When you saw like the movie X-Men First Class, which is basically a Bond movie, X-Men First Class is a Bond film. Did you see a different way to say taking those established characters? And I mean, how many X-Men comics have there been now? And we all know those characters. How can you put sort of that kind of spy spin on established characters like they did with something like X-Men First Class? Do you look to film to inspire you when you're writing comics?
When I work on superheroes, it's here. I'll give this away. I almost never think of it as a superhero story. It's like they look like superheroes, but I'm either doing a romance or an adventure or a mystery or something, and I'm bringing those characters into it to do it the way they would, instead of saying this is a superhero universe. It makes them more relatable to me.
Right.
Yeah, I was just thinking while they were talking about the visuals. Currently, I'm working on a new Ninjak series with Javier Pulido.
Oh,
And
nice.
so what I'm trying, Javier is one of those guys like Marcos Martin, who's just going to do these bananas layouts, storytelling that really use the comics format. You know, it's not trying to do a movie in comics. It's a different way of thinking. And I try to give him a lot of visuals to work with, and yet at the same time get out of his way so he can do what he does. And then I go back and try to put the story back and make sure it's all still happening or whatever. And usually he explains to me, here's why I made this choice and everything. And then I can accommodate with that. And I love when I can drop out dialogue. That's always great. Anytime you have something nice and clear where people don't have to hear, I am shooting him with a Walther 3 can. You want to do that. And I love to also sound effects. You're talking about the Chaykin sound effects, which I loved. Like with him and Walt Simonson would do that, where they'd have like brack, all, and it's all tucked in behind the art elements, so it felt like it's surrounding you, sort of.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, I've never, no comics. That was the first time I actually heard a comic book, was when I started reading American Flag in the early 80s. I never thought that was possible.
Yeah, I think, who is it?
It's weird. American Flag is a noisy comic.
It is a noise. And it was Ken Bruzenak. And he would use letters. They would be huge. Chaykin's work was already incredible, but then Chaykin wasn't scared to have giant text. That like if a machine gun was going bada 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 bada, he would write bada bada bada, these big gigantic letters that would stretch across panels, and it was amazing.
Yeah, a lot of times too, I'll write in the sound effects and I'll describe them. I'll blow them way up on the page, and it's really just for the artist's benefit, so that they're making something that looks like it goes with that sound effect. And then I'll take the sound effect completely out because you don't need it anymore.
Right.
And they made it visually loud. And it's like, all right, we don't need the sound. Everybody, if I think the reader can fill in with their head, I try to do that. Because
sweet.
You're going back and forth.
Are you guys like, do you ever go the Tom Clancy route where you have to have real, like, I have to have this specific gun? or I have to have this specific car with these specific tires. Do you guys ever drill down that far?
I just did that the other day. I was writing another, I've been doing this James Bond stories as like if the Bond of the books was in World War II. You never saw that stuff.
Right.
That's where he got all this experience. And yet I don't want to put any gadgets in there. I'm just trying to use stuff that people probably didn't know about that they were using in World War II, because I think it's more interesting that way. And so like I wrote in Bond using this Waldrop silence pistol. And it's a pistol that looks like nothing but a silencer all the way across, and it holds 6 rounds and everything, and then you're done after you fire it. And it was perfect. Instead of a silencer, you screw onto the front of a barrel. And I feel like I love getting stuff like in there. It shores up the reality a little bit for when I make things that are kind of implausible. You can go back and look it up and go, oh, that was a real thing. I think that's fun.
Oh yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's like Doug is always like, in the script he'll send me a picture of this is what it looks like, kind of thing, and I think it does. The fans of like spy stuff.
Oh, they'll burn you.
They know the stuff.
They won't tolerate you not knowing. And it's like, how many?
So if you put a Glock like 17, back in the Civil War.
Oh,
well, no, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure Brian's like made fun of this a lot. You'll see an artist drawing a complete bullet, coming out of the gun. Or whatever, like, not around with the shell popping out. And you just like, oh God, like it's not a little missile,
I've seen like just complete like bullets come out of the chamber. I've seen complete, like after someone's like unloaded a machine gun, actual complete full metal jacket sort of bullets are on the floor. It's like,
yeah. And then the studio I'm part of, well, we can't go in right now, but it was Periscope. And we did that one day. We said, okay, we're all going to the gun range because everybody's not clear on this stuff. And we just keep getting so many assignments where people are shooting guns all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And we went out there and did a few hours just blasting away and everything. And then everybody's work changed immediately. Like suddenly everyone's holding it right. It's like it makes a difference when you know the stuff. And it's like, yeah, you're going to be doing a lot of fantastic stuff. They're going to have a car doing Fast and Furious stuff, blasting through the side of a building. But those little bits, like the fans will call you on it, and they don't like to see it wrong, especially the Tom Clancy types.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
They get really bent out of shape by it.
Yeah. One of the things that was really cool for me was getting a chance to shoot like powder, sort of black powder pistols before doing Jonah Hex. So it's just like, oh, okay. When you shoot this gun, you can't take another shot in the same direction because there's like this cloud in front of you. So it really made me kind of go, okay, you shoot and then you move a little bit and then you can shoot again. Otherwise, you're just shooting into a blank cloud. So it's little things like that I think they make it feel like you're telling the truth when you're on the page. And I think when someone reads it, they can kind of see it. Just those little tiny things, especially like soldier craft and gun craft, how to enter a room properly. It's like all of the guys that do that stuff actually read comics. So they'll call you on it in a second.
Well, that's like, the joys of watching a movie by, say, Michael Mann, whether it's his debut feature Thief, the way James Caan held a gun with 2 hands, or in Miami Vice, or especially in Heat, when they were, running through the streets of LA with heavy gauge weapons firing. I mean, you feel that, like you said, you feel the authenticity, and it matters.
Even like in Heat, they the group met and had a talk and then walked away. But if you pay close attention, they meet at a power station, so they can't be recorded. So it's just like, oh, but they never mention it, in
Right.
in the actual movie. But if you're like a real nut about that sort of stuff, it's just like, oh yes, I see, very excellent.
No, I think it's true, and with I think there is an importance to that. So often you see in comics where I've got a sort of a I don't know if it's an aversion. I don't like seeing weapons in comics that I don't believe. Like guns that are too big. There's something about the verisimilitude of the action. If the gun is like, come on, man, you can't wield that weapon. You gotta believe it. And as much as I might, when I was growing up, I liked a Rob Liefeld gun. The bigger the gun that Cable was carrying, the better. But then as I got older, I'm like, he couldn't carry that gun. He certainly couldn't carry that into battle. Then I would start getting, angry that the guns are just too damn big, and I think even in comics, especially in spy comics, when you want to pull back, you want to keep that realism in there. Even in La Femme Nikita, even when Nikita has her gun was too big, it's like, come on, you can't carry that with you and run at the same time. That's a big iron on your hip, lady. What are you going to do?
Yeah, the thing that always gets me is when people Bugs Bunny guns, where you'll see like this female character come into a room wearing tight jeans and a tight t-shirt, and she'll fight for a while and then produce a gun. It's like, wait a minute, where did that come from?
Well, that's one of the things I like about how Black Widow has been portrayed in the MCU movies. She's got smaller weapons. It's like she is carrying guns that are right, and you see them strapped onto her, and she can wield, a la John Woo movie or something like Chow Yun Fat. She can wield two weapons at the same time, and you believe it. Like, I believe this, and they haven't pushed that character too far, which I've always appreciated watching the MCU films, is that they never make that. They keep it real, and it's interesting. I'm sure the impulse has been sometimes to make it a little bit more sexy by giving her a bigger weapon, but it wouldn't work as well.
We should all spare a moment for the Desert Eagle. The preferred gun of Hollywood for like an entire decade.
Right. Which well, so now when it comes to back to comics, what about like the art? Do you change up an art style? I don't know. I guess do you use, say, like in film terms, deeper focus? Do you rely on close-ups more? People's eyes? What can you do from an artistic standpoint to sort of add to the espionage?
Well, for me, I try to make it less cartoony, because one of the things that we've all been kind of coming back to is believability.
Right.
I think when you're doing a spy comic, if it's too cartoony, it's just you almost can't take it too seriously. So the style of it, I try to go for something a little bit more naturalistic. Sometimes I'll get slightly more cartoony in the action, but while I'm in the sort of espionage parts of the story, I try to make it as instantly believable as possible. And I think something you mentioned earlier, which I think is really, really important with a spy story, more so than a comic book story, is having a style. Having and I don't necessarily mean an art style, but when someone looks at the work, they can feel a sense of style.
Right, sure.
The spy himself has to have a sense of style, has to have a sense of fashion. And I don't necessarily mean like high fashion or anything like that.
Right.
But there's got to be a certain kind of feeling that it has. And that's the thing that I think Bond is great at. I think the Bourne movies really nail that, is that sense of style that you feel while you're looking at the work.
Do you guys, Doug, when you're writing something, do you and Brian, do you guys exchange, and you too, Jeff, do you like read GQ and look at men's fashions or women's fashion magazines and do tear sheets of cool clothes that you see? Like, I would love to have my character wearing this.
Yeah, well, for me, I think it's I probably spend more time with my head in tactical sort of magazines, just like looking up like, oh man, this would be something cool for Thomas to have. This would be something cool, and all of that stuff. Like his uniform, everything on him is stuff that you can buy. It's
right,
like secret, otherworldly stuff. It's stuff that you can get a hold of, and then there's little lies kind of seated in there. But yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of going, wow, that's a cool house. That's a cool car. That's a cool couch. And just trying to put stuff together visually, getting yourself into the head of the character. I think, and I think both Jeff and Doug will back me on this. You create the character and you get it to a place of perpetual motion. Then the character tells you what they like and what they want, and you just add that to it.
Well, this panel has been the fastest hour-long panel I think I've ever participated in. We've only got 8 minutes left, but I figured before I want you guys to all talk about what are you working on now? What are your current projects and what do you have coming up?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, fine. I am, well, stuff I can't announce yet, man, that's a lot of fun. But I am working on that Ninjak story, and a neat part of it I meant to bring in when you're talking about the style is it's a chance with these sort of stories to let the colorist be more designy. You don't have to do a little local color all through it. In fact, that doesn't feel right. I'll often put in pictures like of Mario Bava movies and say, look at this,
Sweet.
and or the early Bond movies like Dr. No and stuff, where they were just doing gorgeous sets and incredible lighting. You can do that. You just like drop a whole bunch of bad guys into red. Don't spend all this time coloring them individually. Like treat them like a force. And you can do all this stuff, and it feels like what we're conditioned with, like cool opening credits from these movies. We like stuff like that, and it's a way to kind of homage that, I think, in the storytelling.
Right.
Yeah.
So Brian and Doug, you guys working together? Do you have upcoming books? Do you have things you're planning?
No, we just finished up our Kickstarter for our first issue of Thomas River, which is straight up spy. And then just like Jeff, I mean, everything else I'm working on, I'm not allowed to talk about. That's how comics has gotten these days.
Right.
Everybody wants exclusives on stuff, and if you give it away, nobody will cover you afterwards. It's such a weird thing. But I'm working with Hoyt Silva.
It's awesome. The spy panel ends with stuff we can't talk about.
I love it. I couldn't have planned. Well, to touch on that, I mean, to sort of take a detour. How are you all feeling about the state of the comics industry? And also moving over to Kickstarter is a way that a lot of creators have found great success doing that. There was, even controversy that even a publisher like Boom Studios was utilizing crowdfunding as well. How do you feel? Well, I guess, how do you feel about the state of the industry, and how do you feel about using Kickstarter and crowdfunding comics?
I think Kickstarter is super important. You've got to get that bond with your audience and not let it fall apart. At the same time, you do have to find ways to support the shops that are hanging in there through this. It's a real tough needle to thread, but I don't think it's impossible. But we're probably going to have to start doing stuff we should have been doing 10 years ago.
Oh yeah. I back you up on that 100%. I think with Kickstarter, it's really awesome, especially Doug and I have talked about the fact that doing something that's out of the mainstream of comics and probably wouldn't sell that great in your average comic book shop,
Right.
you can do that in Kickstarter a lot easier and be relatively financially successful. But I love the fact that I'm going to be doing more and more stuff for Marvel and DC and possibly Valiant and everyone. So it's just anything that's out there. Kickstarter opens up another road for us to travel.
Yeah, and you're dealing with directly dealing with your audience. There's no middleman, although it doesn't allow people necessarily to discover your work. I mean, so often I found so many comic books going into the comic shops. I would miss that very much if you couldn't find some crazy thing that you'd never heard of before or seen before. That's how I found American Flag when I was a kid. I was like, "What's this?" It's not. I wouldn't have known what it was.
Yeah, you depended on the shop owner or a clerk there who had cool taste to help get you into stuff. That was important to me in college. But I like what Brian's point is. It's like a lot of what you're selling on Kickstarter would have a hard time getting the shelf space in the store anyway.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you can get it to a point where they don't really compete with each other too much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And we found, honestly, I mean, Brian and I went through the whole list of you can see everybody that backs your books, and you'll be surprised at the lack of crossover between your comics fans and your Kickstarter fans. There's not a huge convergence of like, oh, we had 10,000 people that would normally buy a comic book in a comic book shop spend their money on our Kickstarter instead. It was people we have never encountered before, and people that
it's the way you always find out after you do it, like a bunch of X-Men books, like, come on fans, let's follow me over here, and like, hey, where'd everybody go?
I mean, that's interesting. I would have thought that there would be more crossover. What do you attribute that to? Do you think there are people that just peruse Kickstarter and aren't necessarily comics fans, and they've discovered comics via Kickstarter?
I think there are people that are perusing Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, not necessarily Kickstarter specifically, but there's people that are just kind of hanging out. They're reading like little articles and stuff like that, and they're going to the Kickstarter because they can usually port right there from whatever article or whatever Facebook post or whatever. Whereas a lot of times with the comics, you have to go to the comic shop, and I think a lot of these people are people who are like, well, I do this, and I don't know where the comic book shop is near me, and I'm not going to go to the comic book shop. But I can just pick this up right now. So it's a kind of I think a slightly different fan.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, we've only got a minute left, really, of this panel. Is there anything we talked about your upcoming work? Is there anything you have currently on the stands? Anything you want to give a last plug to before the plug is pulled on us? And I want to thank all three of you for being here. This has been so much fun.
Yeah,
dude. Yeah, we could do this all day, man. It's so much fun. And Jeff, it was really good seeing you again, man.
Yeah,
it's been too long.
I can't wait to see you in real life again, man.
Agreed.
I'm probably gonna cry. Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Once we emerge from our Punxsutawney dens,
I mean, this would have been my 32nd Comic-Con in consecutive in San Diego, and not having it, it was something you look forward to all year round, and then no Comic-Con.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's one thing comics readers have shown over the years, they don't let anything kill them or their industry. It'll be back,
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we are going to be having these talks at a table, drinking little waters, and whatever, it's signing books again.
Sure. Yeah. And I do think that that creating comics is a very solitary kind of process. I mean, you're generally at home alone or at the studio alone, just kind of doing this stuff. And it's nice going to a convention and actually sort of meeting with those friends and those fans. That's the thing that I really missed this past year is getting a chance to just hang out with folks, both professional and the fans. It's just that's a part of comics that I didn't think existed, didn't expect it until I got in as a professional.
Well, on that note, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. This was Spies Like Us, Spies in Comics. How fantastic. Thank you so much. And what another great Baltimore Comic-Con panel. Thank you, all three of you. Thanks very, very much.
Robert, good to see you guys.
Yeah,
Good to
great
see
hanging
you.
out, man.
Yeah, this was terrific. Thanks very much.